Smith is a full professor in the Department of Natural Sciences at Texas A&M University, where she's the interim director for research, development, and administration, the biology program coordinator, and she is an American Society for Microbiology distinguished lecturer. So we're very excited to have her. She was recognized by the ASM with the Karski Award for undergraduate education in 2025. Dr. Smith has too many publications to mention and has been the recipient of numerous grants and awards in a broad range of microbial sciences. By her own admission, Dr. Smith came to America to begin her research career in microbiology and has devoted her career to improve the educational and research opportunity for all students, with a particular emphasis on first-generation socioeconomically disadvantaged and underrepresented students in STEM. So today, Dr. Smith will give us insights on how doing more with less is possible and address the challenges of science education in the current fiscal climate. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Smith to our meeting.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I will switch over to my slides and we will get going. So it's an honor for me to be here today, and to follow in the footsteps of Norman Willett, because it sounds like he was a trailblazer for you all, and he lived the life that I'm trying to live now, and I'm very grateful to his children for being here as well. What a wonderful way to have this lecture happen. And I also wanted to say that to y'all, I am an educator first. I was always going to be an educator. I always wanted to be a teacher. But I wasn't very good with children. So it was like that meant I had to go for the adult version, and I've devoted myself to education. And to be frank, it's getting harder. It's getting harder every year. I find that it's just getting harder. And being that I'm in Texas right now, it's even more challenging every day. So I think when you are coming to your teaching and you're coming to your classes with this kind of mindset of trying to engage your students so that they're civically engaged and so they're getting involved in their communities and they're doing more and they're communicating their science, you have to be very strategic and be thinking about how you can do this, right? So, but first and foremost, I've always come from places that didn't have very much. So, and also like many of you, I was the only microbiologist in the environment. So you have to kind of be very strategic and figure out who you can play with and while you're trying to do this work. So so I always start with this to just give you a sense of what it's like, right? So when you join an undergrad institution like the ones I've been at, I'm coming from Richard Novick's lab up the road in NYU, right? I'm sure some of you will know Richard Novick is the RN collection for staff, right? But that's me many years ago when I was a postdoc. And here we have me now where I'm like an undergrad educator, meaning that I do a lot of teaching. 60% of my time's teaching, 20 is service, 20 is research, right? And we're all very happy with that, right? That's wonderful, except that it's actually more like this. So let's be clear. You are usually doing 60, 60, 20. 20% of your time, if you're lucky, is spent on your research. And then the rest of your time, most of your time at these kinds of schools, it's service. You're doing a ton of service, plus you're doing your teaching. So I'm teaching 3 classes a semester usually, and sometimes even more. And I'm teaching undergrads and grad students in the lab and everything else. So you're overwhelmed. Plus, then you have to do all the lovely things. And I'm glad that I got a shout out to RemNet, because that was one of my favorite projects to be involved in, which was getting people involved in microbiomes. But there's all the other things, right? So I love to do sensor, which I'll tell you about in a second. Tiny Earth, I'm very involved with Tiny Earth. And I have a bustling group of students in my lab all the time. So I'm always in the lab. I'm in the lab every day. I never leave the lab. So you're busy, right? You're busy. You're trying to do all these things. BioQuest, Pulse, all these other organizations. So when you're trying to teach microbiology, I always like to start with something to just get you thinking. So when you're thinking about how you teach your micro, what are you most concerned about with right now? And I'm going to let you think about that for a second. You don't have to say it out loud, but just close your eyes and think about what's the thing that's wigging you out right now when you're trying to think about your teaching and how you're doing it. So I'll let y'all think for a minute. And some of you who are retired can also be thinking about what you're thinking about right now, even if you're not teaching. All right. So I'm sure there's loads of thoughts here, what you might be thinking about. And as I'm coming into ASMQ week and Abercamps week, I'll be talking to all my friends about this, what they're thinking about right now. But for many of us, we're thinking about to be frank. We're thinking about resources, we're thinking about money. And the thing is, like, I'm always thinking about money in the context of I have all these students, I want to do all these things with my students, but I don't have any money, right? And I have had grants, let's be honest, I have had grants. But when you're working in an institution where, for example, you buy the soap and the paper towels and the gloves and everything yourself with your lab money, it's tricky. You're trying to stretch those dollars. And I always say that I showed this slide when I was first a faculty member, like when in 2012, effectively, I showed this exact slide with this exact cartoon. And it's the same now. I'm still worried about funding because we're losing our funding left, right, and center. And an institution like mine, a HSI, we're losing funding that isn't just research funding. We're losing funding that pays for programs. So it pays for bridge programs, it pays for summer bridge programs, it pays for first year experience programs. And this is hugely problematic for us because it's shrinking. What we do have is shrinking. We never had much, but we have less now. So you have to be thinking, what are we going to do as the dollars start to dry up, right? But what I always say is I like that you started with mission. My mission is I'm trying to prepare my students for the world. I'm trying to get them out into the world to be thinking about what they're going to do when they leave here. And how are they going to bring that microbiology knowledge with them? So how are they going to bring what they've learned in class with them? And then people always give out to me for using this because they say it's kind of cliche. But I really do want to infect them with a love of microbiology. That is my mission. I'm infecting you with a love of microbiology when I teach you. And I want you to bring that with you out into the world so that you'll love your microbes too, right? It's very important. So sensor. So sensor is Rutgers. There's Monica Devanis is up the road from you, and there's loads of people who do sensor in New Jersey. I don't know about folks in Pennsylvania per se, but we've got loads of people up that end of the world, not so much down here in Texas. But the sensor ideals stands for civic science education for new civic engagements and responsibilities. And I got involved with sensor right at the start of my career as a faculty member, and I was delighted because what Sensor does is it gives you a series of ideals through which you can teach your students, right? And you can live your teaching lives through these ideals. And effectively, what you're trying to do is teach your students true issues. So you're not teaching them content, you're teaching them content through an issue, which makes it relevant to them right away. You're thinking about how can you put this knowledge to use, right? What can you do with this knowledge, which is really important for your students. And probably more important, most important of all, is you're emphasizing to your students that science isn't all knowing. It's a human endeavor. It's flawed. It makes mistakes, right? But it's a process, and it's a correcting process. We correct the science as we go, and we learn new things. And ultimately, that it's super useful. You can use it for stuff, right? So it's not like you're putting this, going through all this notions of learning this science stuff and then not using it. You're absolutely using it. You should be using it every day, right? And we're ultimately trying to solve these challenges, right? So that's the philosophy through which I teach. And in essence, it's nice because it teaches your students civic capacity as well, builds their civic capacity. If you're getting your students to think about the science content through dealing with these issues of national, global, local import, they'll understand what it's for. And more often than not, students are sitting in the class going, why am I here? Like, why do I have to learn all this stuff? What's it for? Mostly they'll say about math, right? Let's be honest, it's easier with chemistry and biology, but you can do this with any course, right? You're getting them to think systematically about things beyond the classroom, beyond those cycles and the pathways that we have them learn. They're starting to think about historical impacts, culture, economics. They're bringing it all together, ethical factors, legal factors, right? Why is it important that we do this? What's the role of this in our society? And ultimately, then they can start thinking about civic, governmental, policy, all that sort of stuff that comes from the science, that the science feeds and helps us with every day. So it's really important to connect science to their civic lives because then they see the value and the importance of them, right? So when I always say this, I say STEM education is civic engagement. So we think about civics. When I was in Ireland, we call it civics, right? You took civics, and that was how to be a scientist, a citizen of the world, right? But I see your STEM education as being the civics course that all students take because it's really telling you about what issues do you care about and what issues should you be caring about. And in this case, it's really important to understand where your students are coming from, right? So if you're going to start talking about issues, you really have to know where your students are at, right? Because our issues are not necessarily our students' issues. And especially now, when we think about what we're being faced with every day, right? Every day. So we just had raids on the north side of San Antonio, right? There's stuff happening all the time. And how are your students being impacted by that? That's important to understand. So here's my issues, and these were on my first slide. So this is a workshop that I did with faculty, right? So this is what the faculty cared about. And this is a word cloud from faculty issues. And it happened to be a water workshop. I study water, so it was a water workshop. And these are all the things that the faculty are thinking about, right? So when you're thinking about these issues, you're going to say to yourself, well, I'm going to teach my class through these issues because these are the ones I care about. And that's easy. Antibiotic resistance, pollution, water, right? Bioremediation, whatever it is. But you have to be thinking about, what about my students? So I polled the students, right? I polled the first years at my school through our first year experience program. And I asked the first year students, the first year, not majors, first year, brand new students, straight in from high school or wherever they're coming from, what do they care about? And look at the issues they came up with. So we think about our students and we say to ourselves, what do our students care about? And, we're caring about antibiotic resistance, but are students caring about antibiotic resistance? Probably not. They're thinking about things like traffic, homelessness was the big one. It was really shocking. So the first years, what did they care about? Homelessness. What did the city care about? Cleaning up the camps because it was damaging the local ecosystems, right? But the students were looking at it from a completely different lens. They were concerned about the homeless population, right? Why aren't we doing more to help the homeless population? So that's really important. So they start civically engaged. Well, it started in 2000 and what was in the 90s, back in 2001 and the 1990s. And Monica Devanis, who's my hero, she was starting teaching molecular biology in a large enrollment class and struggling with engagement, trying to get the students to be engaged. And so what she did was, it was groundbreaking at the time. She took HIV and AIDS and basically taught her class through the issue of HIV and AIDS. And in doing so, started the students thinking about, why is this content, this molecular biology stuff that we're learning about, why is it important? And she was able to engage them that way. And it became the first model course for Sensor. And from that, we led to like thousands and thousands of people have engaged with Sensor at different levels throughout the years. And things like cell and molecular biology became cancer, like teach cell and molecular through cancer. Gen Chem became exposure to toxic chemicals, right? So ecosystems of Southwest Florida, these all sound way more cool than what we actually call them, Gen Chem 2, right? No one wants to take Gen Chem 2, but ecosystems of or toxic chemicals or whatever is far more interesting to students. We aren't doing as well with the snappy titles for the calculus courses, unfortunately, but we have work to do there, but we're getting there. So bringing us back to Sensor, you see where we're going with this? So you're in essence, you're thinking about your course, but you're thinking of it with this kind of framework, this philosophy through which you're going to teach your courses. So teaching through the issues. So my mantra is teaching through the issues. And if you look me up, this is what I always call my slides. I call it teaching through the issues because science is everywhere and it's all the time. It never stops. It's every day. It's in everything that we do. And we should be thinking that way when we're talking with our students. So when I moved to San Antonio, I had been studying in New York, the Gowanus Canal and Newtown Creek, super fun sites that were in the neighborhood. Everybody walked past them every day, not knowing that there was raw sewage spilling into those canals and creeks all the time, right? And when I came to San Antonio, the one thing you hear about the San Antonio is the river walk. Everyone goes on about this river walk and the San Antonio River and how important it is. But lo and behold, like right away, this was in my first spring semester, articles started coming out about spills in the San Antonio River, and I was like, well, that's not good. If the city's economy, I should say, runs on this river, there should be a lot of interest in protecting this river, right? So I was like, well, let's start talking about that. And if you start thinking about the river, there are many issues you can teach through. So check this out. PFAS, we all hear about PFAS every day. Microplastics, right? Giardia. So Texans love to swim in warm pools of water. I don't understand this. This warm water that loves parasites love to replicate in. Drought, wildfires, floods, and sewage, right? All these issues, right? And now I'm going to perform a magic trick for all of you to watch. Brace yourselves. Ta-da! So all of these issues can be taught, can be linked to a concept, right? So when I think of sewage, I think of eutrophication. When I think of fires, you think of energy, climate change, membranes for Giardia. You can teach cell structure by teaching them about Giardia. If people are getting Giardia and getting sick from Giardia, they'll be reading about it, and then you start teaching them about the cell structure of the Giardia parasite. It's way more interesting than what we're typically doing. All right, so easily done. And there are tons of these courses available on the website. So all of these courses are freely available. And to Norman's legacy, sharing these things is what's important. You have to get the stuff out to your colleagues so they can use it too. And we have a journal that's free. It doesn't cost anything. And we publish people's coursework. So in essence, here's the course, worked for us. This is what we did. You should try it too. So keep an eye out for that journal. It's free. So Science is everywhere all the time, and it's done by everybody. So we know that our field suffers from a lack of representation for many. And this is when we were talking about in my bio, we were talking about underrepresented students. I'm at a school in an environment where about 78% of the population are Hispanic. And as you can imagine, we have a handful of Hispanic professors. So when I came here, and I say this as, an Irish lady who doesn't speak Spanish, I'm teaching at a school where most of my students are Hispanic and come from a completely different culture to my own. So I think it's important that we increase this representation, and I'm not the only one, right? So it's science is for everybody. It's not just for the privileged few who get access to it, right? So what I've been doing is for the longest time, me and everyone else who does this is we're using these cure course modalities. And this comes from, I started with Erin Dolan doing this work, but cures, classroom undergrad research experiences. Our students work, all of them pretty much work. If they're not working part-time, they're working full-time. They're all working. And in fact, proof of this is Gabriel here, the gentleman on the left-hand side of this photo, wasn't there that day. So they photoshopped him and put him into the picture so he gets the credit of being in the picture, right? But these are my students who are doing the lab work, and this is Tiny Earth. So those of you who know about Tiny Earth, this is the study of antibiotic-resistant pathogens, and Manuela has been asking me for strains, and I owe her strains for this. But in essence, what we're talking about here is resistance. When you kill everything, you leave the resistant ones behind. It's common sense, and we know this, and we've known it for a long time, right? But the pandemic has done a number on us because we were kind of getting a handle on this before the pandemic, but to be honest with you, it's far worse now. So all that widespread use of antibiotics during the pandemic is only making this even worse. And we now know that these infections are going to skyrocket. It's going to get worse than it was before. Whatever policies and procedures and everything we had in place, it's failing us now. And so we know that this is going to be a huge, huge problem. And we have not figured out a way to address this just yet. But this is where your policy understanding comes in. But when you're trying to think about things to do with your students, this is great. Tiny Earth works with high school students. I've done it with high school students. I did it in New York. We're doing it across the country. This is a consortium of faculty across the world, in fact, all doing the same thing. You collect your soil, you isolate bacteria, and then you patch them onto a petri dish that has been impregnated with a bacteria that represents a resistant strain. It couldn't be easier. So instead of putting your antibiotic discs on the plate, you're putting bacteria on there instead and measuring zones of inhibition. And depending on your chemistry department or your collaborators, you can go further. You can send things to Tiny Earth and they will do the processing for you. I'm trying to build this capacity in-house with my chemistry colleagues because if we can do it in the chem classes, we can link across the curriculum. But it's a very easy, very, very, very easy way to do microbiology with the research component. And the neat thing about it is you can make it real by connecting it to an issue, as I mentioned before. So what we've been doing is we've been studying a development, a residential development that's across the street from us. And when I first got here, we had trees, beautiful wild areas with roadrunners, actual roadrunners, armadillos, we have coyotes, all sorts of things. But they're building houses there now. And so when they started breaking ground, I was very interested as to what that development might look like. Was it going to be sustainable? Was it going to be green? How are they going to do it? But most importantly, I was concerned about the bottom line was how much were the houses going to cost, right? Could people live there, And they were, to be honest, they're quite expensive. They've built some affordable housing now, but it wasn't the priority at the start, let's just say. So I was very interested from a kind of, gentrification kind of idea that on the south side you're going to build all these houses, but most of the students wouldn't be able to live there. So I was like, well, let's start with that, see what this is going to, how this is going to go. But then I said to myself, well, as you gentrify, you remove the soil, you damage the soil, and you damage the soil, and the soil is our source of antibiotics. Let's tie these two problems together. So what we did was we went across the street and we got soil over a year. We're still doing this. We got soil over a year as they were developing. And they also have a greenway, and the greenway has been done with like low impact development, so meant to be green and all of this. And then we have untouched areas that haven't been developed yet. And we're looking for the numbers of microbes that produce zones of inhibition, have potential antibiotic production, right? And as you can imagine, all of them are in the undeveloped area, right? So we're seeing the soil quality just go down as it's being developed, and that you would expect that. So we're going in a little bit biased, but it's a great way to teach your students about soil conservation and why it's important to conserve the soil. It's also a great way to tell your students about green development. And is it really green? Is it doing what they say it's doing? Is this simply a way to kind of encourage folks to think, well, I have green over there. I don't have to worry about the soil here, when we should be worried about soil. Soil is massively important, and our USDA colleagues on the call will know how important it is at scale across the country to protect our soil. So this is a great way to teach your students about the soil and why soil conservation is important, because ultimately, without the soil, we lose our actinomyces, we lose our microbes that can produce antibiotics. It ties into the problems of antibiotic resistance and so on and so forth. So it's all connected. Very One Health, okay? But also then, as I mentioned, it's about crowdsourcing. So this can be brought into not just antibiotic production, but also genomics and analyzing genomes, right? And microbiomes in particular. And so when we talked about RemNet, we talked about how you can take soil and you can isolate microbes, but you can also isolate communities. So if you know what soil's microbes are there and you know it's viable, you can also look for what you can't culture, which is a huge part of the ASM curriculum guidelines right now. All these unculturable microbes, how do we deal with those, the unknown? And so this is RemNet. We had it, we in our last bit of money that we had left over from RemNet, we spent it on bringing a bunch of educators to San Antonio and basically gave them a couple of days of an intensive workshop using nanopores. And nanopores are portable sequencers that you can use. They're not entirely simple to use, but we have workshops and such and tutorials that will help you. But you can use these in classrooms, and they're being used around the country in classrooms. And I'm not just talking about college classrooms, in K through 12 classrooms as well. And so RemNet is doing it, K-Base are doing it too. And then Cold Spring Harbor is doing it up in Long Island, and they have grants and everything else to support teachers doing this. And I have loads of teacher colleagues who are doing this as well. So genomics in your classroom and analysis of the genomes is an area that you can go into. And this does not cost the earth. That sequencer costs, those chips, they go into a sequencer that costs $1,000 only. And you just plug it into your laptop and off you go. So it's way more affordable than your conventional sequencing. And even the kits aren't that expensive. And you can, as I said, you can still send things out, but you can even reuse the chips. So we use dummy chips and we have students practice loading them, just as an example of things that you can do. So keep that in mind, microbiomes. And because we're all about resource sharing, we have webinars and we have suppliers. And so with the suppliers here on the right-hand side, we have a spreadsheet that has all of the vendors that we can find and how much they charge for things, right? So most often than not, when you go to start things like this, you don't know which kit to buy and which one is expensive. So we try to save you a bit of legwork by doing that. So if you're thinking about this, let us know, and we'll be glad to help you in as much as we can. Although the grant is over now, but we're still keeping these things alive. Right. So science communication. So doing science, doing genomics, doing RemNet, all of that. But the communication part is really where it's at. If you can't communicate your science to all communities, you're failing. You're just going to fail. We know that science communication is the biggest challenge that we face today. And we're inundated with fake news, misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, all of it all at the time. So this is probably the most important thing for me and what I try to promote most in my classrooms. So some of the things that we can do is reading. You focus on reading. So you start with articles, and if you don't have any money, having your students collaboratively read together is a great way to start. Most students don't read articles. They might read articles by the time they're graduating, but we don't emphasize this in our classrooms enough. And having them read even one article, just one primary article or a review, whatever it is a great way to start. You can use Hypothesis, which is free. You basically upload your link to the article and you just have Hypothesis in your browser, and then all the students can read as a class together. And if you assign team leaders for the reading, they can basically be answering the questions as the students pose questions to each other. So this is a great strategy to encourage reading of the literature, which is the first step. And then another thing you can do is what I've done. Instead of doing papers, I have the students do posters. I've been having my students do posters for years, from doing posters simply on paper to doing them on portable whiteboards. I've had them done on portable whiteboards, and then having them do digital posters. And when they do digital posters, you don't have to print them. You don't have to pay the money to print them, because even printing them can be expensive. And what we do instead of that is we do a gallery walk using Padlet. Now, Padlet, you do have to subscribe to. It's a little bit expensive, let's be honest. But you buy it and you can use it for a multitude of things. I use it for everything. And here are the students' posters, and you basically scroll along and you can view each other's posters. And what I have them do is I have them put up their practice posters first. They peer review each other's posters. They rank their posters. They can give comments. They can make them fix them. And it's a great way to get them engaged. And if you look on here, I don't know if you can see this, but they're doing sequencing with me. So we do, this is bacteriology now. It's a slightly more advanced class, but that's actual sequencing that the students did themselves, right? And they do the libraries and everything in class. So it's great fun. It's really good fun. And another thing I like to do is, I've been doing this for years. I have a project where I have them build a website. Instead of doing a paper, they do a website using Google Sites for this. And basically, they're assigned a microbe. They choose which one they want to do. And you can have microbes of agricultural importance. You could have microbes that bioremediate. You can do whatever you want. In this case, it's antibiotic-resistant bacteria. They choose one, and then they have to follow all these prompts. Now, the prompts are designed to align with the ASM curriculum guidelines with respect to structure, function, and all of this, metabolism, everything. So they're answering about it as if they are the microbe, though. So in essence, they have to almost anthropomorphize the microbe, but it's a great way to get them thinking outside of the box and being creative. And not only that, I've tied it to something else, which I think you guys will get a kick out of, knowing what you were telling me about before about the posters on the hill. They do creative works for me. So this is mycoplasma. That is the microscope picture of the mycoplasma. And here is their crocheted mycoplasma. I love this. And they do all sorts of creative works for me. And I've been having them do this for years. And they're very proud of these things. And I use a Kondo rubric, the Marie Kondo rubric. And if you know anything about Marie Kondo, she was the one who was all about the folding and the cleaning of your house and about bringing joy. So I said the rubric for me here is, did it make me giggle or not? And if it made me giggle, they get an A. And this one made me giggle, so she got an A. But it's about bringing fun into the classroom. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. So it's better when you put everything together, right? So you can have them do these creative works and you can put it together with the arts. So when I was at the new school, and the new school was very fancy, it was the only school I've been at that had a lot of money. And although they don't now, I should be mean to the new school because they're struggling financially. But when I was there, they had money. And what the students did at the new school was mostly art, theater, acting, stuff like that. But they were very creative. And so I rather stupidly told my students, let's do an exhibition. We have all these lovely microbes and things. Let's do an exhibition. So we had a walkway that connected some of the buildings together. And I used to see all these exhibitions from the historian folks and all this. And I said, sure, why not? Why don't we do this? It'd be good fun. Now, I don't know anything about art. I know nothing, but I followed what other folks have been doing. And you know, those little cards that you would have and so on and so forth. So I put this out and then people heard about it and they asked me, did I want to put it on the website? And I was like, sure, we'll celebrate the students' work. What I didn't realize though was that they put it into some sort of New York events thing for the city. And then all these random people showed up for this exhibition. I had people show up in fur coats. We had like biscuits and like fizzy pop. I didn't have anything fancy, so it was ridiculous. But I swear to God, so this is what it was like fancy. And I had a curated booklet that went with it, and I had a little opener at the start of the booklet. But what we did was we had the creative work, and then alongside it, we had a QR code that led to their portfolios. So the portfolio was the content that the students had made. And then the creative work was the exhibit, right? And it looked something like this. It looked very fancy. And so folks off the street they're using their smartphones and coming to the students' portfolios and learning about serratia, or whatever. It was rad. And this is Staph aureus as an example. And here's Staph aureus. There's the exhibit. It's very fancy. I still have this in my office right now, but it was a great way to engage the public. And I've continued this even in Texas. We're doing it here. And here are a bunch of other examples. And so you'll recognize SARS down there in the corner. That's a mixed culture up top, right? There's Klebsiella, crochet Klebsiella. And this one on the right-hand side, that's Pseudomonas, and he's nucleating ice, you see? So the students are very smart, and that's TB there in the middle. So they're very creative. When you give them a bit of leeway, they'll do all sorts of lovely things for you. So it's really important to have this effective communication, and engaging the public and increasing their love of microbes is really the goal. So what else can we do? What else can we do here? So one of the things I've talked about was like this portfolio thing I have them do, and I have them do for virology as well. But one of the things about virology in particular is that we have a lot of misinformation to deal with, right? And we hear it every day. It's always on the news. And in particular, I've always been dealing with this anti-vaccination theme that goes through our lives every day, right? So fake news is an activity I came up with, and I'm using this tool called breakyourownnews.com. It's a free tool whereby you can make a headline. You can make a headline and you can use whatever image you want to do, right? So it's extremely easy. There's a headline, there's a byline, students do it. And because they've become experts on this bug, whichever bug it is, I ask them to make up a headline and it can be fake or true. So in this case, they have alarming acetaminophen was a culprit in a deadly C. difficile outbreak. Now, you would be thinking maybe it is true. I don't know if it's true. It might be true. It may not be true. But what they do is they have to give me their little background as to this, whether it's false or not. And they have to give me citations as well. And the citations have to be in APA format. So guess what? I've had them research something very simple. They've told me whether it's true or false. They've made this headline for me. They've got citations. They've looked up, they've evaluated sources. And the thing is, then I have the students vote on it. And the way that they vote on it can be, there's a number of different ways you can do this. This is an example where I just had them do it in Google Docs. So here on the right-hand side, Google Docs, did they think it was true or false in the first column? And then did they change their mind in the second one? And basically, where I was asking them if did they change their mind, they'd had an opportunity to discuss it in the class as to whether or not they changed their minds or not. There's all these ways you can do it with you can do it with clickers, you can do it with, they can vote, hands up, fingers, numbers, whatever way you want to do it. But the neat thing about it is that the students are doing all the work here. So they're coming up with the headlines, they're voting, they're discussing, you're watching, and you're taking it all in. And the magic of this thing is that they become really cynical. At the start, they're voting really quickly. You can watch it over time. They're like, oh yeah, that's false. That's got to be false, right? But over the course of the class, you'll start seeing that they're taking longer to make those decisions. And then eventually they don't want to say whether it's true or false. They want to really think about it. So they're becoming cynical and they're starting to think about things. They're critically thinking, right? It's an epic activity. It's really simple. Loads of my friends are doing it now. It's easy. It's so easy. And you're building their understanding of fake news as well as we go. So it's on Cubes. So if you don't know what Cubes is a website that has, again, in Norman's footsteps, a bunch of modules that you can adopt and adapt. So if you download this, you can change it, you can do whatever you want with it. It's free. Do whatever you want with it. But there's tons of resources on Cubes. And because I'm an educator, I want to think about how I can assess this. So I've already assessed it in class, I can see it, but then I put these questions on their exam. So you can do it on an exam and you just add the questions about what is news, what sources should you go to, and so on and so forth. You can have all sorts of questions, but by putting on the exam, it makes my life easier to grading. So I can grade this with their exam, and it's like, it can be bonus questions if you want, but you can also ask them to reflect. And so I've asked them to reflect on things as well. And these are all examples of their reflections. And you can see that they're realizing that you can really start some fake information, and they've done it themselves. Like they've caught their friends out. They've convinced their friends that article X is real when in fact it was fake, and they did it themselves. So they begin to realize how powerful this is. And in a world where I'm not a literature person, I'm not an English professor, it's not my area, but I do know that it's easy to spread these kinds of things on the internet, and my students need to be thinking about this. This is a really simple way to build their critical thinking, right? And it goes beyond that. So during the pandemic, we published an article, this one here, called Promoting Rapid Vaccine Science. Now, I did this during the pandemic. And now, right now, I'm dealing with folks who don't want to vaccinate their dogs because they think their dogs are going to get autism from vaccines, right? So this is a big problem. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us, right? So we have to be thinking about how to do it. So we made resources for folks that was literally about what science is and how science operates. These are all available, freely available on the web, on YouTube, for your download to use however you want. All these YouTube videos, we recorded these. They're all Creative Commons. You can use them however you want. There's no fees, whatever, but it goes through everything from using English as the main language that we do our science through, to understanding Twitter and how fake news can spread on Twitter or X or whatever it is, to Elizabeth Bick's analysis of images, right? It's all in there. And so I welcome you to all have a look, use it, please, because it's there and it can be of value to some of you, I'm sure. Right. So here we have all these lovely things we just did, right? So when you think about personal development and you think about developing your students' civic capacity, by doing all of these things, we're ticking a lot of boxes. You're thinking about how science can be a tool for civic engagement, and it can be a tool for engaging your students their journey through science, how they see science, how they see the value of science, how they relate to science. It's all very, very important. You're trying to build this inherent love of science in their psyche. And this is the way to do it. So here's an example. I'm going to end you up on a course. This is an entire course. And the reason why it's my favorite course to teach by far. So my dad's a plumber. So I grew up with a intense understanding of how plumbing operates, and hence my love of water and pollution and microbiology. My dad got me my first job as a science, as a young student or whatever. But this new school basically said to me, Davida, we want you to teach a first year class. And I was like, okay. And they were like, you can do whatever you want. And I was like, fantastic. I'm going to do a class on toilets. And they were like, oh, holy God, please don't do that. And the Pearl students, you see, they don't get to choose their first year seminar. They're just put in a first year seminar. So some of the students were stuck in my class and they were horrified because they wanted to do, witches, or there were things on, arts and these fancy artists and all this other stuff, but they're in my class. But I'm prepared, I'm ready. I want to get these students going with science. So the first thing we do is we do a classroom agreement. If you're going to deal with difficult topics in your class, I highly recommend this. This is not my idea. This comes from other folks in the literature and my peers. But you do a community agreement and you can establish norms. So in this case, I simply ask the students, when do you feel comfortable? What makes you feel comfortable when you're learning? And if you look at this one, it's very simple. Same thing. It's Padlet again. If remember I told you I get that subscription to Padlet. They tell me when they feel comfortable, and they tell me when they don't feel comfortable. And you can ask the students to rank what their peers have said. Whatever comes up as 5 out of 5 or highly ranked becomes the norms for the class. And so it can be something as simple as, I don't like it when you pick on us to answer questions by ourselves. And I'm like, okay, I'll try not to do that. I'll do this instead. Or we don't like it when you give us fake deadlines and don't hold us accountable. It can be anything like that. So that becomes your agreement and it's agreed upon ahead of time. Okay. And then you can have them journal. Not commonly done in STEM classes, let's be honest, but you can do it on the discussion board. This was done on the discussion board, but I've also done it on ePortfolios, like the websites I told you about before. And I literally just asked them to reflect on what we're doing. So given that they ended up in this class, the first prompt I gave them was, what are you thinking now that you're in my class? And in essence, I have them do it when we do things in class as well. So here's an example. We use the census. We look at the census data as regards toilets and sanitation. And this is a bit old now at this point, but here we go. Here's Maryland. Student from Maryland looks at her own state and she's shocked to realize that not everyone has access to sanitation in Maryland. So when we think about access to toilets, we think of it as being a faraway problem. No, it's right here in America, right? There are plenty of places in America where the plumbing is substandard, right? And not everyone has access. And now they're wondering what the census is for, right? What is the census thing? I don't care about the census, but they should, because this is what we're talking about when we talk about the census. You can also tie it to economics. So biogas, not a big thing in Texas. It should be. When we are producing our waste and getting rid of the wastewater, treating our wastewater, we're generating biogas. And depending on where you are in the world, you're either using it or you're just venting it off into the atmosphere. And it is a huge solution to many of our problems, right? But it's just not widely adopted yet. But you can make money from poop. You can actually make money from this, and you can sell the gas back to the city. You can bring your students on field trips. Now, the field trip can be the cafeteria. It could be the library. It could be anywhere. It could be the bookstore. And if you're lucky enough to have a plant, you might have a plant. You might have an energy generating plant. You might have a wastewater plant. You'll have some sort of a plant on your campus. You always do. And in this case, it was the water treatment. We had a water treatment plant in the basement. No one ever went to it with the students. And I was like, oh my God, we should totally go there. We study water. We have a plant right downstairs. We don't have to go up the road. We can just go here. My students loved it. And again, these are first year students, not science majors at all. They're first years. They asked me about reverse osmosis, and we were talking to the facilities guy. I didn't talk. The facilities people talked, and they explained how everything worked. It was rad, totally rad. And then you can bring them back to biogas. You can say, well, what's going on globally with biogas? And you can go to this website and check it out, and you can see where biogas is being generated. And here's Newtown Creek. There's a wastewater plant in Newtown Creek. Newtown Creek is the Superfund site we were studying in New York. And here's the biogas being generated in Newtown Creek. It was one of the first places to do it. And now they realize, wow, so Newtown Creek is actually doing something that we didn't know. And it's right there and it's tied to the economy. It's about money, it's about business, it's about circular economies, it's about sustainability, and it's not just microbiology anymore. And here's the rest of the world. So you showed them this. And again, in Texas, we don't talk about sustainability in Texas that much. Let's be honest, it's not a priority for many folks down here, but it is being done and they don't realize it. So we are making biogas and we are doing it in San Antonio, and they're making money off of our waste in San Antonio and selling this gas to their stakeholders. So that's really important. Another thing I love to do, obviously, is have them work on projects together. Projects is a great way to do it. And you're right, you're really trying to get them to do team-based projects. So in this case, I challenged them to make a better toilet. So a porta potty in particular. So here are the students working together to develop a cardboard prototype of a porta potty. And this porta potty is a waterless porta potty. So it has a composting toilet. It has a solar panel on the roof. It's using rainwater, gathered rainwater, and various other design features, recycled materials, and so on and so forth. And the students did this together during the pandemic. So they could be super creative. And if you remember, this is about toilets, sustainability, and all the while I'm teaching them fermentation, microbiology, waste removal from rivers. It's all connected. So if you look on the left-hand side of this is a prompt. This is the first day of the class, right? So the student is basically saying, what class are you in? And she's like, I'm in the class on poop, right? So what am I learning about? And I'm kind of a little bit horrified, whatever. So she's reflecting on it. And then on the right hand side, loved the class, thought it was the greatest class ever. It now had made me an emoji on how important poop was in her life. You know what I'm saying? So enjoyed the class, enjoyed learning about it, made friends in the class because we were sharing a journey that was about social justice, environmental protection, sustainability, economics. It was all connected. And they also learn about cultural practices. So when you're dealing with students who are potentially not as exposed to other cultures, having them understand that the way we even use the toilet culturally may not be the right way to do it, right? The way that we put toilet paper down the drain is not sustainable. There are other ways you can use bidets, Lotus. There's loads of different ways of doing it. So they start thinking about not America first. They're thinking globally. They're thinking bigger. They're getting out there into the world and they're considering other ways of doing things, which is really important. And remember, I'm foreign, so I'm always thinking this way. I want them to think beyond America because there's a whole world out there, right? So bringing us back to Texas. So you're saying to yourself, well, Davida, come on, you did that in New York and you got all these like students from all over the world in New York and it's very cosmopolitan and so on and so forth. Well, in San Antonio, my students care about homelessness, right? So they do. So what we said was, I said to them, what social issues can you come up with respect to toilets? And I just said that. That's all I said. And I split the class into two and I said to them, off you go, first year class in San Antonio. And this is what they came up with, right, with respect to toilets. These are their thoughts, not mine. And this is all of what they said. So it's from things like gender discrimination to there are not enough toiletries, there are not enough toilets in San Antonio. The fact that people are using drugs in the toilets. They tackled all of the issues, right? And in the same way that I did with my New York students, I had them come up with project. And in this case, the project was, where are the public toilets in San Antonio? And they were horrified to see that there are 13 public toilets in San Antonio, and that's all there are. The rest of them are in private settings or whatnot. And then they designed a toilet for me. So I had split them into groups and they came up with a toilet and it has all these mad design features that I never would have thought of. So, you know, when you go to the sink and you can see all the people beside you, the sinks aren't partitioned. They all said we'd love to have partitioned sinks so it's a bit more private. And they also said they wanted changing tables in all the stalls. They had all sorts of lovely ideas, different ways to dispose of your sanitary napkins, etc., etc. Students did this. And they started reflecting just like the students in New York did, being culturally aware when confronting the creation of bathrooms is a necessity if we want to continue the progressiveness we claim to be working towards. All students taught first years, brand new students. So they're very thoughtful. They're very thoughtful. You just have to let them express themselves. So STEM education is civic engagement. And this is what I showed you earlier today. Teach through the issues. The students will get it and they will be able to do it with no money. It doesn't cost the earth to do this kind of work. It really doesn't. And that's where I'm going to leave you. So I'm very grateful to y'all for listening to me babble on for almost an hour. And I welcome any thoughts or questions that you have for me. I'll stop sharing now. But there's the QR code, so you can off on the slides.
So I guess we'll open up the floor to any questions anyone has for Davida.
I will take anything.
I have a quick question, Davida. Thanks so much for a really awesome talk. You have like a bunch of really amazing ideas here, and I was just wondering, um, how, like, what are your suggestions with regards to how to get started? Like, you were like, oh, the San Antonio River is like right there, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah.
But what if there's not necessarily something where you're like, aha, this is like the clear thing I should be doing. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions about like ways to help ourselves find those pathways to get into this sort of thing.
That's a brilliant question, and I'm glad you asked me, because the best way to start is to ask your students what they think the issues are, right? So one of the things I've done, you can do this a million different ways. So I've had the students, I give them post-its, and I just say, right, we're going to start off with, what things do you care about? What are the issues you worry about? And you can give them framing. You can say environmental issues, or, economic issues, whatever you want to do, but whatever issues they care about. And I say, write down one issue on each post-it, right? And so they write down their whatevers. And then I said, right, go up to the board and let's start putting these post-its into groups. And so then they start putting their post-its into groupings, right? And eventually you'll be able to draw circles around things and say, well, this one is parking, or this one is the cafeteria, or whatever it is, right? Once you have that, you'll know what the theme that they're caring about is. And from then you can take a couple of steps. Now, this is where it gets tricky. So if they say the cafeteria, you're going to have to make the connection to the biology, but it's very easy. So once you have the cafeteria, you can say to your students, take one more step and say, right, well, now here's the challenge I'm putting to you all. How do we engage with the issues that you care about with the cafeteria through the lens of biology? Right? And you say to them, well, what would we like to think about? So I'll usually give them an example. So we could think about recyclable materials for carrying your leftovers home. Should we do that? Why won't we do that? And so on and so forth, right? So that's a good way to start. Another way, you can just have them do it on the board altogether. Just have them go to a whiteboard in groups and start talking about it. But a cheeky way I did it when I first came to San Antonio, this one is really easy. And I love being, I'm lazy. I'm really lazy. I told the students, I'm new to San Antonio. We're going to learn about all these concepts in biology. I want you to take one issue that you care about in San Antonio, and you have to connect it to a biology concept that we're learning in class, and we're going to do it with a poster, because they've never done posters before. Now, they weren't very good posters. It doesn't matter. You're going to teach me about the issue through some concept in biology, right? So, and I got all sorts of fantastic things, stuff I didn't know about at all. So like, they did tell me about like coyotes and the whatever. They told me about boars, wild boars. Wild boars were a thing. Huge dog problem in San Antonio, wild dogs roaming the streets, but all sorts of things, from the parking to the lack of transport, solar energy, all sorts of things. I had like 16 posters by the end of it of issues that they cared about. So ask them. Ask your students, they'll tell you. Super easy.
Much. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you, Susan.
I did have a question. Your breaking news app
Yes.
so you said that the students make those, and then are they researching, some that are real, and then they're making up some? And
Yeah.
does that app make all the pictures that go with
So
it?
they have to, all the app does is just make it basically places the picture and puts the byline on it. So they have to come up with the picture. So it's the same thing.
Okay.
If they're using a picture, they have to cite their source and all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But I encourage them, they can either use something that's real from the news, or they can just come up with something that they know is true and make it up themselves, like a real headline that's real. Or they can come up with, just make something up entirely. More often than not, they get a kick out making up the stuff. But I'll give you a giggle. I did it at NABT. I picked 3 headlines myself from the news. One of them was, Texans are people are forgetting the Alamo. That was one of my headlines, right? And I just made it up. People are not forgetting the Alamo. It's absolutely not true. But loads of the people attending NABT thought it might be true. And they said, oh, that's obviously false. Or it's obviously true. People are forgetting the Alamo. I was like, nope, it's false. Y'all fell for it. But it's a really simple way to do it. It's no work for you and free.
Oh, we like free.
Free is the only way to do it.
Davida, you have the nanopore there,
I
and
do.
we have it now in our lab because I partnered with one of my coworkers that was here but he had to leave, and I texted him and I said, "Did you see that? Do you want to explain maybe for people that don't know what they really are, what they are and their cost? Because
Sure.
I'm still learning about them. I didn't catch up with all of the genomic sequencing when I was a PhD student, but now I'm learning because you can do a lot of projects with them."
Yeah, so the nanopore, so basically I'm really privileged. I have an Illumina sequencer in my lab as well. I have a benchtop Illumina sequencer. Costs around $16,000 now. It was a bit more expensive when I first got it. But that sequencing library, you're going to do polymerase chain reaction, and you can do it all with some reagents that you just buy from a company, and it's fairly easy to do. And I've been doing it with my classes for years. And to run the Illumina sequencer is expensive though. So every run on the Illumina, just the reagents alone is like $600. So most people can't afford that, let's be honest. I mean, I can barely afford it. I got it with my startup money and I was able to run a few runs. That machine is very expensive. You also have to have a warranty for it if anything goes wrong. The nanopores are $1,000, as I said, and you're buying that little machine that the flow cells fit into. The flow cells themselves are the area where the sequencing actually occurs. And so in essence, there's a kit that you buy. It's not super pricey, and you just treat the flow cell with these reagents, and then you make libraries and you add them to the flow cell. And what the flow cell will do is, unlike the the Illumina sequencer sequences about 350-ish bases of DNA in both directions. So it's pretty short, but it's what we use for sequencing COVID sequences. We use it for genomes, whatever, but it's short. The nanopore, on the other hand, instead of it sequencing 300 base pairs, it can do much longer fragments. So up to like 10,000 base pairs of DNA. The problem with it is it's not very good. It's not a very good sequencer, but it's really, really cheap sequencer. So in essence, you can do a lot of sequencing and it doesn't cost you very much. And it doesn't, as I said, it's not very difficult to use. It's very easy entryway. And what's happening now is there are lots and lots of organizations that are offering grants and like startup packages and cheaper sequencing to get you started with the nanopore. And Cold Spring Harbor, which is closest to you, it's not particularly close to me, but they're offering workshops and funding and little seed grants to get you started with nanopore. So you can do things like sequencing a gene of a bacterium and comparing it across all the bacteria, or you could sequence the whole genome of a bacteria on the nanopore and get the entire genome. So depending on what you want to do, there are free tools out there and the reagents out there. And better than that, VWR is a vendor. I'm sure you're all using VWR for your teaching materials. VWR now stocks nanopore materials and you can get them from VWR and it doesn't cost the earth anymore. So if you're interested, I can connect you all with Ellen Dow from KBase, connect you with Jason Williams from Cold Spring Harbor and help you all get going. But it's a great place to start. And as I mentioned, there are teachers doing nanopore sequencing with their students now. And I know of Christine Gertain, for example, she's in New Jersey and she's doing it with her students. So it's a great way to start. Genomics, so fancy. I mean, when Manuela's right, when I started, I was sequencing genes, right? And it was like, yeah, and it was so expensive. It was so much money. And now it's like, it doesn't cost very much anymore.
Yeah.
But here's the thing as well. Even if you just do it with water, I'm not kidding. If you just do dummy kits, if you have a kit, if you have a QIAGEN, you can have the students just use the QIAGEN and then you can have DNA that you made for them. But you have them going through the motions of using a kit. It's the process and learning of doing that is really valuable to your students, not the result necessarily. The result may not work, but if you have kits and those flow cells, as I mentioned before, I keep dummies, I keep dead ones so they can practice pipetting on the flow cell. Just holding the flow cell is rad. You know what I'm saying? So be always thinking about that. Doesn't have to be real necessarily, because if you don't have the money, which most of us don't, you can get started that way.
Well, I think we have about run out of time, but Dr. Smith, thank you so much for an amazing presentation.
You're
I
all
think
very-
you've given everyone lots of ideas, and you may be getting a lot of people asking you, how do you do this? Where do you get that, etc. So thank you again. Thanks to all of you who were in attendance, and we really appreciate it.
You're
Good
very
luck
welcome.
to you in your future research.
Yes, and to all of you too. And please keep me in your thoughts if you're doing anything. And if you're coming to San Antonio this week, let me know. I'll be looking out for you.
See you there.
Thank
Very
you.
welcome.